Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I am Vadim Perlovsky, and today we are excited to welcome a local California brand that we are excited to taste out of Sonoma. We are here today with Redwood Empire. As always, we're excited to see wonderful, beautiful faces join us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'd say majority of the group here is part of the Los Angeles Whiskey and Spirits Guild, and the president of the guild is here. David Donahue, do you want to say a couple words?
Vadim, thank you as always for those of you who have been on the virtual tasting with Vadim. You know how much we at the Los Angeles Whiskey and Spirits Guild really appreciate the effort that he puts into bringing these virtual tasting events to us on a very regular and consistent basis. What number are we on about, do you think?
135, I believe.
135 virtual tastings. I think I've missed, I don't know, 8, maybe 10 thereabouts, but most of them I've attended. And they've been a wonderful deep dive into some brands that I have not tried, been into some different types of whiskeys that I never really thought I'd be attracted to. And Vadim, you've done a great job kind of introducing us to many of them. Really looking forward to Redwood Empire. Welcome.
Thank you so much, David. So as we mentioned, there's a few regulars here, and welcome back. And we have a few new faces. Welcome. Thank you very much for giving us a chance and joining us. Just for you to keep in mind, we're here to get nerdy and ask questions. This is not a TV show. This is not an Instagram live where we're just talking to a screen. Please participate. Toss your questions in the chat. Share your tasting notes. That's what we're all here for. And hopefully you become a regular as well. Become part of the family. We are super excited today to learn about Redwood Empire. It's a brand that I've been following for a little while, and we're always happy to check out somebody local, somebody we can support. And joining us from Redwood Empire is no one other than the head distiller, Lauren Patz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Happy to do a tasting. I'm pretty excited. I really enjoy sharing my passion with spirits and whiskey in particular. I am very open to fielding questions. I love questions, especially ones that make me think about what the answers are. So feel free to just lay them on, interrupt me at any time. In a past life, I was a teacher, so I can kind of get into a lecture-y type mode. So at any moment, I'm very open to being interrupted. Did you have anything else, or should we kind of just start diving in?
No, I think the last thing is everyone feel free to participate, but we just ask that you keep yourself on mute unless you're actively speaking, just so we don't talk over each other or we don't get background noises. But other than that, have fun, get nerdy, ask questions, enjoy the whiskey. We have 5 expressions in front of us. I'm guessing we're going to start with the lower proof, then go to the higher proof. Do you want to throw out an order you want us to go in? I try to color code them, but just let us know and I'll put it in the chat.
So I would like to do Pipe Dream, Emerald Giant, Lost Monarch, Grizzly Beast, and then Rocket Top is the order that I typically taste in. And I'm just going to start off just a little bit about Redwood Empire. I'm not sure how many of you have tasted our spirits before or are familiar with our brand. So I think I got to do my due diligence in explaining and expressing a little bit about who we are before we start tasting. If you want, feel free to nose, feel free to taste, but I'll go into depth with each one of the expressions a little bit later, like 2 seconds later. I just want to give a brief overview of our company. We started out in 2013, the distilling side of the company that we're a part of. We're part of Purple Brands, which is owned by Derek Benham. It started off as a wine company, so it kind of makes sense that we're up in Sonoma, Napa Valley area, and they've had some real success on the wine side. So they decided to kind of reinvest in the company by building out a spirits kind of portfolio and a distillery. So the distilleries kind of started conceptually in 2013 and then was built around 2014. And we've been putting down a good amount of whiskey. We also do some gin and some vodka that are under a different brand. but Redwood Empire is our whiskey line. And we are still relatively new. Our first release was in 2019. So David's background, that Redwood Empire, that was the first release. And we no longer make that specifically. It is kind of the precursor to the Lost Monarch. It's a blended whiskey of bourbon and rye, but that very first release also had some that had been finished in port barrels as well. So if you find a bottle of that with that label on it, know that I'm not sure it exists pretty much anywhere. I'm not even sure we have a bottle of it at the
David,
distillery
you want to show
anymore.
that bottle again?
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Speaking of finding that gem.
Yeah.
This is batch 1.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not even sure I've tasted it. I joined Redwood Empire like maybe a year and a half ago now. Before that, I was distilling with Spiritworks Distillery, and I've been distilling for about 10 years personally. So I've been around a little bit, not a crazy amount of time, but enough to know what I'm talking about, I like to think. And so I'm relatively new to Redwood Empire. They are 10 minutes away from Spiritworks Distillery, drive-wise. So we've been neighbors this whole time. And I'm very close with Jeff, our master distiller. And when they were building out their distillery, we were already distilling at Spiritworks. So we have kind of like a, neighbor-like relationship there. But I made that transition, a year and a half ago, and it's been really fun. There's been a lot of differences. One of the biggest ones is the still behind me right here is a continuous column still, and I have previously only worked on pot stills, and so that was a big transition for me coming in and figuring out just how different that is, and kind of just procedurally wise what needs to take place in order to make really good quality spirits. So Redwood Empire, I'm not sure if you guys know what the Redwood Empire refers to, but it's the stretch of land, kind of coastal land going from Marin County, which is right outside of San Francisco, all the way up to the Oregon border. It's where, as maybe none of you would be surprised to hear, redwoods grow. And it's part of the inspiration for our brand, kind of this more rustic and really majestic, powerful approach towards spirits. So that's a little bit about the brand. If you guys have any specific questions about that, feel free to ask in the chat, or about myself or anything like that. I'm happy to answer those as well. But I'm sure you all came here to taste more than to hear me pontificate about just information in general. So why don't we dive right in to the Pipe Dream? So we have 3 core SKUs, and those are the 3 that we're going to be tasting first. So that's the Pipe Dream, the Emerald Giant, and the Lost Monarch. And the Pipe Dream is our bourbon expression, and it is currently by far our most popular and definitely our most successful. The rest are doing very well, but the bourbon is probably doing another third in sales over the other 2, which makes sense. Bourbon as a spirit type is probably the most popular of American whiskeys, and by probably I mean it most definitely is, but we have had a lot of success with this one in particular. So Pipe Dream is the name of a tree. Also, all of the SKUs are named after redwood trees, and they have the coordinates on the back of the labels as well, if you ever want to look them up. But Pipe Dream is a 4-state blend. So it has Californian, Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky whiskey in it. And it's also a range of ages from 4 to 12 year. So it has a lot of opportunity for layering of flavor, for really achieving some fun things with blending, and getting some nice complexity that still has a lot of full mouthfeel, a lot of softness on the palate as well. And I'm always curious to hear what people's tasting notes are. For me, the Pipe Dream kind of has like a chestnutty quality, like a meaty, nutty quality on the nose. And also, just some like maple and honey. It's a very recognizable bourbon. It has viscosity, which when I'm judging bourbons or when I'm tasting bourbons, I really look for mouthfeel. You get a lot more fusels coming over during distillation with bourbon, and I would expect to have those expressed on the palate in the finished product as well. So I really like the longevity of this finish. I think it has not only that softness, but the flavor carries through as well. So you get a nice balance of flavor and texture running through the entirety of the taste there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Is there any other questions about the bourbon in particular? Any thoughts?
So you mentioned it's 4 different states. Obviously,
Yeah.
some of it is sourced. How much of it is actually your own distillate?
We're at about 15% now
Okay.
for our stuff. I think these core SKUs, the goal is probably always to keep it at the price point that it's at now. And so until we, build out a much larger facility, which is, we have a down payment on a still and we're looking for real estate currently. I think we're going to keep it as a blended, sourced and produced whiskey. But one of the coolest things about working at a distillery that does that is we have like a library of whiskey. I mean, we have about 5,000 barrels on site with us that are, grain to glass made in Sonoma County. And then we have about 13,000 offsite currently. So we pull stuff in as needed, and then kind of taste through and blend through each individual batch. The percentages of each one of those stay generally around the same. I mean, with all craft spirits and spirits in general, you're looking to supply consumers with a level of consistency and obviously quality. So we're not drastically changing it from batch to batch, but there are slight tweaks being made. I think originally they started out at about 10% of our distilled product as part of the blend, and that's kind of crept up to that 15% range. And I have a feeling that's where it's going to be for a little while as of yet. Yeah.
Somebody asked about the mash bill.
Oh, yeah. So because we're sourcing from a couple of different places, the mash bills also range, which is really fun. Also, our mash bills that we make in-house change slightly from batch to batch, from mash to mash, but generally we're at 75% corn to about 72% corn. We do some wheated bourbons and some high rye bourbons as well. Those we typically save for the bottled and bond projects that we're doing. But a few of those sometimes end up in this as well. But generally we're within that 75 to 72% corn. And then the second largest grain would be the rye. I think it's like, 22 to 18%. And then there is some wheat as well. Wheat is my favorite grain to work with. I think that it has a lot of really lovely qualities to it. I'm much more about subtlety and kind of delicacy that leads you on this journey into depth of flavor. And so I think wheat does that really well. So there's wheat, and then of course malted barley. And the malted barley is really the thing that kind of changes the most drastically from mash to mash. As we are bringing in grain for production, that regularly changes what types of malts we're using. So we use everything from obviously like chocolate malt, golden promise, Burr malt, Vienna, Munich, kind of the spectrum of malts we're using to just augment and kind of give each batch a little bit of its own special, unique flair. And then again, those can be really utilized during that blending process when you're looking to kind of complement different flavor profiles or build in a certain direction to create what you want.
Lauren, may I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
How was your blending process done? We've had in the beginning of the pandemic, we had a brand on that did some really good blending, and they sourced 100%. So at that point, I became a big fan of sourced blended whiskeys because I think it gives you a palette of flavors and options that just using your own distillate doesn't provide you. So as in with the picture over my shoulder, it looks like some sample bottles. So could you just kind of share with us how Redwood Empire does their blending and selecting and
For sure. I mean, most of it's done through sensory perception, right? I mean, you're opening up barrels, and first run of sensory perception is always with your nose, just like it is when you're tasting. I mean, we're just smelling down the line of barrels and kind of identifying flavor profiles or off notes, things that we think might need to take a little bit longer in barrel or might need to be put into some sort of different product if they're not exactly what we're looking for and looking to express. So first thing we do, we're opening up barrels, smelling through them, and then after that, it's tasting. And this process is more involved for the bottled and bond. For these three main SKUs, the actual ratio of what we're using between the four different states and also the different years, we kind of keep within the same range in order to provide that consistency. But we are increasing some of our states. So we just started receiving larger amounts from Bardstown is one of our distilling partners. So we just started getting larger batches from them. And so this past run, we just did a batch of Lost Monarch. So we smelled through all of those, both rye and the bourbon, just making sure that we're on the right track and that we're not veering too drastically from that house flavor, because before then it was more of some of the other producers that we have.
Lauren, I've been to Bardstown, and they have a really small facility, and there doesn't look like they're making that much.
None, probably zero. They probably won't be able to supply us anymore in the near future. I mean, it's funny. You should make a joke about that because we're currently, talking about the next couple of years, and they're essentially at capacity already with making whiskey for people.
What do they have, like 20 fermenters or something like that by now, and two massive continuous
Yeah,
column stills?
it's wild. I mean, it's a beautiful facility. It's gorgeous.
It's a must
Uh,
go to. It's a must go to. If you guys ever get down to Kentucky and want to go out and check it out, it's an amazing facility.
yeah,
The question is, are you the product that you're getting from them?
yeah.
Are they aging it for you, or are you bringing it over and having and aging it yourself?
We do a little bit of both. Some of it does stay there and get aged there, and then some of it we bring over. The majority, I mean, the tricky part is, especially where we are, and I'm sure you're all struggling with situations of fire hazards and insurance and all that kind of stuff. The insurance here where we are, since there's such a fire danger, is astronomical. So for financial reasons, it does make more sense for them to keep it there. Also, having some differences in humidity and temperature during that maturation process really allow for a wider variety of flavor towards the end of aging. Here in Northern California, it's definitely cooler, especially because where we're at is a little bit closer to the coast. I mean, we are kind of located right in the Redwood Empire. And so our aging is a little bit slower. We don't have quite as much loss as some of the states that get much hotter. I hear in Texas, it's like you're lucky if you end up with 10 gallons in a barrel after like 4 years. It's supposed to be just wild out there for whiskey aging for sure. So for us, it's a little bit slower of a process, which is why for the bottled and bonds, we don't harvest until 5 years. Bottled and bond, it has to be minimum of 4 years. We've just waited that extra year to kind of get it more where we want it. Because our aging process just takes a little bit longer, I think, out here, even though we are full size barrels, 53 gallon. Most of our stuff is char 3 and toasted. So one of the most important decisions you can make as a distiller is your barrel treatment program. 75% of the flavor in your whiskey is coming from your barrel. So if you don't take some time and care in selecting not only your cooperage, but also kind of what you're wanting them to do to your barrel, I think you're not wasting time, but you're definitely putting yourself at a disadvantage when it comes to what you're able to achieve with the finished product. So the toast allows for deeper penetration into the wood, and then the char is actually acting as a filter for some of the things that you might want to chemically bond out of the liquid that you're putting into it. So both play a pretty important role in that aging process for sure.
Follow-up question: since you said there's a high percentage that you're sourcing, do you have the ability to indicate, to example, Bardstown, what type of barrels you want them to put the juice into
Yes.
and where it's sourced?
Yes, definitely. We tell them the mash bill that they're making, the amount of each different mash bill. They're making the same mash bills that we make in-house. Some of the other providers, no, that's not an option. We just buy what they have to offer, which is the same thing that they do for everybody. But yeah, for Bardstown, they're making the mash bills that we give them, and we also get to choose the cooperage if there is enough supply of those barrels specifically. So usually they'll give us like 3 different options. They'll tell us what they'll have, and we can kind of choose that way. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what do you guys think of the bourbon? Acceptable, approachable? That's kind of the whole, yeah. For me, I mean, I really enjoy this kind of blended approach as well, because you really get a lot of different flavors. Like I said, you really get to create something very complex. The distillery I was at before, I mean, I also loved working there, but it was like, everything was a single barrel. We didn't have inventory to support any sort of blending at all. And so what was in that barrel was what came out, and it was good. But I think that this added layer of skill and process has really enhanced the overall product in the end. And it's fun. I mean, who doesn't want to taste through, 84 barrels, which is kind of what our batch size is right now for the 3 main SKUs. Is we're at about 84 barrels per run. And we do like 1 to 2, 1 run a month about is kind of where we're at production wise. So fairly large production. We're making a little over 4 barrels a day on the still. So, we're milling, mashing, fermenting, distilling, everything in-house, as well as harvesting those barrels and proofing them and putting them into bottles. So we are, we're putting down a good amount of whiskey simultaneously, for sure.
Long term, as you either go add more of your distillate or even move to 100% your stuff, do you think you'll change your actual label and your products to say, hey, we're something completely new, or will you try and kind of use the current Pipe Dream, Monarch, and product lines that you've got now?
Well, that's a good question. And I think we're still kind of figuring out what the path will be. Like I said, our first release was in 2019. And so we're just kind of getting a feel for the reception. I strongly believe that it makes sense to leave those 3 core SKUs as partially sourced products, because it really allows our price point at this stage to be so much more accessible and affordable. And I really appreciate that, having come from a crazy craft background where we're selling like $80+ bottles of whiskey and things like that only. It's really nice to have a bottle of whiskey that is much more approachable financially, but also is like a very high quality product that I think holds its own against pretty much any craft whiskey out there. I think that this is a wonderful standard of whiskey. All 3 of them, I think, are really good examples of the individual spirits that they're representing. But to kind of further answer your question, the bottled and bonds that we make, they are 100% grain to glass. So there is kind of like a separate tier of that we offer as well. And obviously they have different packaging and labeling and all that jazz. Yeah.
Right.
So the
But I don't
bottle
know.
and bond is all your distillate?
Yeah, bottled and bond legally has to be same distiller, same distilling season, 50% alcohol, and a minimum 4 years. Those are kind of the 4 rules to make it bottled and bond. So that's 100% grain to glass, our stuff, right? Yeah.
Very cool.
I mean, now if you wanted, it's kind of nice to do the Grizzly Beast next to the Pipe Dream if you wanted to go. I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but those are the 2 bourbon expressions. And so it's kind of nice to just do a nose side by side for those 2 as we move on. But yeah.
Somebody in the chat asked, since we discovered that Bardstown was one of your sources, are you allowed to talk about the other sources as well?
I mean, I'm sure you can guess some of the other ones. I mean, MGP, obviously. And then we have some coming from Jephthah and Dickel and stuff like that. So just a little bit of everything, to be honest. And I think when you're doing blended stuff with purchased spirit, you kind of have a responsibility to make it taste not exactly like each one of those on its own. Although I've had plenty of brands and spirits that are good, and I enjoy each one of them on their own. I mean, they're all good stuff. So otherwise, we wouldn't be using them. But I think if you want to put your own label and stamp on it, you kind of have to do your own thing with it, for sure.
How big are your releases, and are you going for consistency batch after batch?
Yeah, pretty. Oh, you mean for the bottled and bond, or for the?
No, for the Pipe Dream, for the
Yeah.
core lineup.
They're, like I mentioned, they're about 84 barrels a batch currently. And so that's like 4,700 gallons, roughly, depending on, you know, what we're able to get out of each of those barrels. And then we are going through providing consistency to consumers, which is why we do play around a little bit with percentages, but like percentages of ages. So that 4 to 12 year, we kind of have set percentages within the age ranges that we use for the batch. And then also pretty close ranges for the states as well, or the suppliers for those. Those do change a little bit over time as we're kind of receiving or slowing our purchase of certain things. But for the most part, we're going to the goal is always to fulfill consumer expectations, right? And you don't ever want to put something in a bottle that's drastically different than something that they've had before, unless you give them a heads up. Or it's just that much better. I don't know. But yeah, we're definitely going for a certain level of consistency with each product, for sure.
As you're combining these different, what do you do? What do you have in mind when you're making your own flavor? Like, what did you have sort of a vision? Did you have a profile you're going for? Did you have, I mean, obviously you're not trying to make Maker's Mark because we just buy Maker. But I mean, what did you have a vision while you're doing it, or?
Absolutely. I think you have to have a vision when you're, I mean, I don't want to say an artist, but distillers are that blend of science and art. That's my personal distilling philosophy, is that you have to understand the science of what you're doing in order to achieve quality and consistency, but you're also making a consumable. And so you have to have something that, you have to have a palate. You have to make something that's really enjoyable and good. So yes, you should always have a vision that you're striving for. And with the Pipe Dream, the vision was to create like the perfect mouthfeel on the bourbon. So something really creamy, really soft, really buttery. And it kind of comes across, like, as I mentioned, a little bit nuttier. The vision for the Emerald Giant, which is, I'm going to move into the Emerald Giant now, was to create a rye whiskey that was not astringent. So a lot of craft rye whiskey out there, a lot of what's available can be harsh and lean into this very bright, aggressive astringency. And you get that. There's distilling methods that that happen in order to achieve that. And there's also aging practices that achieve that. We did not want to go down that route. Personally, my style is much softer approach, even with some of the more expressive grains like rye. So in order to do that, we're talking about slightly longer distillation durations, slightly lower proofs going into barrel. Solubility is a big consideration when you're talking about barrel entry proof. So you're talking about either wanting to have the alcohol act as a solvent for the tannins, or the water act as a solvent for the sugars in the wood. And so by adjusting those barrel proof entry points, you can kind of try and funnel into what will be extracted from the barrel in the long run. So the goal with the rye really is to create something that is absolutely recognizable as a rye, with those, tobacco, earthiness, almost like a savory kind of component to it. That's what I like about rye, but still have enough softness that it doesn't suck all the moisture out of your mouth as you're sipping on it. And rye is my absolute favorite type of American style whiskey. I'm sorry to say Japanese whiskey is my favorite type of whiskey, but I really, really love rye because intellectually it's very stimulating to me. It's a very difficult product to make well from a production standpoint. As a raw material, it's a struggle to deal with. You have to kind of know what you're doing in order to get the alcohol concentration out of it. And in order to get the flavor profiles and the texture and mouthfeel that you're looking to get out of rye as well. And then also from a consumption point of view, it's also stimulating because I think it has a much larger breadth of flavors that are available on the market. Bourbon, for the most part, I think that you can feel relatively safe when you're purchasing bourbon. I mean, it's probably going to be on the sweeter side. It's going to be soft. It's going to be a little bit more gentle. But with rye, I think that spectrum is wide and varied. And so there's a little bit of intrigue whenever I'm opening up a new bottle of rye because you don't really know exactly what you're going to get with it. And that's both good and bad because sometimes it's not good and sometimes it's really good. But that's the goal for the Emerald Giant, was really to create something recognizable as rye, but certainly softer than kind of the industry has gone recently with that spirit, for sure. So the rye is 4 to 8 years is the range on that age-wise. So a little bit less in age there. And I mean, the rye is probably my favorite out of the 3 core SKUs, I would say.
They say that rye as a grain is the toughest to work with.
Yes. Yeah, it's gluey, it's sticky, it doesn't want to break down. So when you're mashing, you know, the goal is to facilitate saccharification. So you're really trying to break down as much of that starch into more simple sugars so that when you do pitch your yeast and you're kind of initiating fermentation, it's readily available for that yeast to consume and then produce ethanol from. And rye really is very resistant to doing that. It has a slightly higher protein content than wheat does. And it's just a struggle, but there's some things that you can do. I mean, you can play around with malt content. We also do enzymatic additions. So we use both an alpha amylase and a beta amylase to kind of smooth over some of those rougher edges. And we just added a secondary beta amylase as well. That's been really, really helping. So yeah, I mean, fermentation for whiskey distillation is different than brewing and beer. I know that there are brands out there that really talk about using beer techniques and brewing beer to make whiskey. And that just hasn't been my experience with fermentation for distillation. I mean, the goal really is to kind of get slightly higher alcohol yields so that you'll have enough product at the end to pay for what you just did. But everyone has their own approach. Every distiller thinks they're right because they have to, because you got to make decisions all the time. So you don't want to be questioning yourself. You just got to push through and believe that what you're doing is the right thing. Which I think makes it fun for all of you listening, because you get to hear so many different perspectives and views on how to process our raw materials and make these spirits. And then you can kind of judge for yourself what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. But yeah.
There was a question from Orlando. What's the mash/age of the rye, and is it also multiple sources?
Yes. So all 3 of the core SKUs are going to be 4 states. And the rye mash bill is very high rye. So it's between 95% rye and 86% rye. And then the other grains in there are wheat, because I would never not put wheat in something. I would always do it
Right.
if I could. And malted barley. So there's no corn in this at all, but there is some wheat, which does help with the softening of some of those more aggressive flavors that can come off from rye for sure. So 95 to 86% rye, wheat, and malted barley kind of make up the rest of it. And then 4 to 8 years is kind of the age range for
Thank you
the
that.
rye.
I'm a big fan of rye, and this one for some reason I get like the blow pop, the candies, the Jolly Ranchers. I get sweetness from ryes. I love the spicy nose.
Yeah.
Something about it. I am just such a huge fan of ryes that are done well, and this one is really done well. Excellent work on it.
Thank you.
I don't know because I'm new to the brand. What is the price range for this bottle?
I think it's like 35.
Fantastic.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's between, I'm pretty sure that it's around 35. It obviously it depends on where you're getting it, but, and I think it's like a steal, to be honest. I mean, I don't know any other brands that have 12-year-old bourbon in a bottle that you can buy for $35. But
no, this is
that's just me.
Work. Yeah, Adam, I like that comment. $35 is a bonkers price for this bottle.
Thank you. I think so too. I mean, I like the fact that like I said, it's so accessible. Like, I want to see these, especially these 3 core SKUs. I really want to see them. People feel good about just having them on their own back bar all the time,
Right.
and not feel worried about drinking them. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a time and a place for like very, expensive, very special, can't get your hands on type of stuff. I'm all for it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but there's got to be something that you're comfortable with drinking that you don't mind pouring a couple fingers full and having, on a daily basis or whenever.
Yes, a couple fingers on a daily basis. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you in Michigan? Jason, do you guys have it up there?
Are you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we've got the standard 3. The
Yeah.
only thing we don't have are the bibs.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We
Glad to hear
are
that.
a nation. We're full across the nation, which is also exciting for me. I've never been in all states before, so it's kind of cool. I don't have to just be like, well, if you traveled like 8 states away, maybe you'd be able to get a bottle of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. So yeah, I do really enjoy the fact that the Emerald Giant tends to be, like I said, just a little bit softer than what you might typically expect from a rye, but still, can really pack a punch in cocktails as well, which is always nice. I feel like any good whiskey should be able to be sipped neat and be blended in a cocktail. I'm not a huge cocktail person. I'm more of like a shot and a beer type of person, but most people drink spirits in cocktails. So you kind of have to make it so that it's capable of doing that as well, which kind of leads me into the last of the 3 core SKUs, which is the Lost Monarch. And this one has overwhelmingly been the one that people like to mix the most. I really enjoy the Lost Monarch. I love it because I love giving it to people who are very into whiskey, because I want to ask them what it is, like if they can figure out what it is. It is a blended whiskey. It's a blend of straight whiskeys. It's pretty rare to kind of see that, just because most people, it's a blend of bourbon and rye, which is unusual because most people would just bottle rye and just bottle bourbon, because you get a little bit more selling power by having that added designation on your label. But it is what was I calling it? A rye-bin. It's a rye bourbon. It's not a burr rye because it has more rye in it than bourbon. It's 55% rye and 45% bourbon mix. So for me, it's like very bourbon on the nose. Like, I'm all thinking I'm going right in. Maybe it's a high rye bourbon, but it smells like bourbon to me on the nose. And then when I start sipping on it, it's suddenly, I'm like, wait, wait a second, because it doesn't have the same kind of weight on it that that a lot of bourbons have. It has kind of like an effervescence there that the rye is providing, kind of cuts through some of the viscosity, and it's just such a mind tease for me when I'm drinking these blind. I'm always like, what is this? But yeah, it's a really fun spirit to have. I say it's a really great gateway whiskey because it is a little bit of best of both worlds type situation. It's just, again, kind of going back and hammering home that idea of approachability and accessibility, and just kind of something fun to share and enjoy, but still a little bit of intrigue there about what it is and how it tastes. But yeah, it's a fun one.
This Lost Monarch is one of my I call desk whiskeys. One of the ones that I keep within distance when I'm working, because and I go through a number of them because it's fun. It gives you a little bit of something different every time you go after it. So I don't need to have, I don't need to look like a weirdo with 50 bottles right at my desk. I can, just keep one or two, and I'm, you got variety.
I love that. Yeah.
As someone with 50 bottles on his desk, I take offense to that.
I know.
Well, the work desk.
I have an extra table. I have an extra table in my office that just has bottles on it.
And Orlando, some of us work from home, so we can't help but have, 50 to more bottles.
I do work from home. That's part of the problem. I have a living room with 100 bottles. I can't take half of them up,
I did just see a question asking, so it's rye, and the answer is no, it's a whiskey. So in order to be rye, all of the mash bills in it would have to be predominantly rye grain, and that's not the case for this whiskey. So there is rye whiskey in it and bourbon in it, and it's a blend of those two things. Yeah. So that's why
it's obviously not as simple as you taking 60% of the Emerald Giant and 40% of the Pipe Dream and just combining it. Same sources though that went into there, correct?
Yes, same sources, different percentages, different ages, definitely. But this Lost Monarch is the one that is kind of the came from the original Redwood Empire. So that first bottle that we saw with the other label on it, that was kind of the precursor to this product.
So that was going to be my question. So were you're sort of recreating what was there? Like, what sorry to be a broken record and ask the same thing. I just find it fascinating when someone's sort of able to start from scratch and decides this is the flavor I'm going for. So what were you recreating that and making it, like, what was your thought with this?
Well, with this one, this recipe was done before I was working at Redwood Empire. But I think their goal was really to create this like perfect sipping whiskey, right? So it's kind of like already a cocktail in a glass because there is so much going on in there. And I think that's really the direction that they were trying to head in, especially since the earlier iterations had a portion that was finished in port barrels. They're really trying to create something that's just like a sipping whiskey on its own. But it's interesting because this version, this Lost Monarch, is definitely the one that people put into cocktails. So it's just been kind of funny.
No, but I see what you're saying though, because I definitely get the rye first and then it finishes with bourbon. So it does have that cocktail feel to it. But it's really lovely. It's the first time I've had two of them. I just don't remember which one. So I don't remember if I've had this one before, but it's really lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a fun lineup. You know what I mean? Like you get I think the goal with the bourbon and the rye was really to just kind of create these like really excellent, super solid expressions of each one of those spirit types. And then the Lost Monarch is kind of just like the weird side, kind of fun piece of the puzzle that keeps people intrigued and on the line for sure. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I would jump in and say, yeah, I totally agree with Jordan. Like, really very interesting. I dig it. And it with the next expressions that we have being bottle and bonds, higher proof, it makes me wonder, Is there a chance that you guys are going to have this Lost Monarch available at like a barrel proof or something like that in the future?
Oh, you've got my script coming right out of me right now. So the goal is to put out a cask version of each of the 3 SKUs as well, and they'll be super small. There'll probably not be more than 1,000 cases. And remember, we're like a national brand, so 1,000 cases is pretty small. And we are really excited to offer that. I think cask strength offerings of whiskey really embrace the part about spirits that I love the most, which is that they invite consumers to be much more involved in their consumption. With beer and wine, you're kind of given a finished product that's lovely and wonderful, but you're really not allowed the space to kind of play around with it very much outside of like pairings and things like that. So with spirits, it really invites consumers to make cocktails with it, to play around with the alcohol concentration, which is why I like cask offerings so much, is because it gives you the opportunity to kind of see at what percent alcohol is like your, perfect zone of flavor. So yes, we are working towards that right now. The goal is to have a label done and approved by June so that we can get it printed. It's like, with the way the world is right now, for so many different reasons, logistics are impossible to describe. Trying to get glass, trying to get anything really, packaging materials, raw materials, it is such a struggle. I mean, I just went to put an order in for citric acid. We use citric acid for cleaning. Everybody uses it. We use it all the time. It's part of our CIP system, all that stuff. And it jumped from $2 a pound to $16 a pound. And so that just gives you an example of how crazy things are right now. But the goal is that we should have it be, the cask version should be bottled in July, August. But they're kind of rubbing up against the time that we're going to be doing our second round of bottled and bond as well. So I can't promise that the cask will be out this year because it might get pushed instead in order to do the second batch of bottled and bond, but it's definitely in the cards, and we're going after that cask iteration pretty hard. Yeah.
Rabbit hole question.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any merchandise that you put online that you sell? Because I think that some of the logos, or at least some of the labels for Redwood Empire, have been just fantastic. And I see that in a trucker hat or a t-shirt or a sweatshirt.
Yes, we definitely have shirts on our site. I haven't looked at it recently, but we just hired a brand manager. And so he's been really putting some effort into flushing out the website with merch. So I know that we do have a store online, and I too love all of the artwork that are on the labels. I think the Pipe Dream is probably my favorite. But I really like the Grizzly Beast and the Rocket Top as well. I think both of those are really beautiful. And I like the quotes on them. I think the quotes are pretty fun.
Well, coming from somebody who only wears sweatshirts that have, whiskey themes on them, I'd be happy to support it. So I think a lot of us that are huge whiskey nerds, spirit nerds, and would love to be able to kind of support brands that have really kind of cool, images on them. And I think that Redwood Empire definitely does.
Plus, it's California, right? So,
thank you.
But it was so funny. Our our head of marketing, she's like, you've made it when someone gets a tattoo of one of your label images. So we had a picture. Someone just sent it in, just showed it. Like I think they shared it on our Instagram or something like that. They had gotten the tattoo of the Lost Monarch guy over the entirety of their forearm, and so she was like, "Oh, done! We did it! We've succeeded! We've made it!"
Yeah.
It was pretty funny. But yeah, it's I agree. I think the artwork is really cool. It's a question that I do get asked is who does our artwork, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't have an answer for that yet. I really need to make sure that works its way into the information pool in my brain so that I can share with people. But I really enjoy it. So yeah, there should be some merch on online that people can get for sure. We just got these shirts. They say Redwood Empire on them, and they're flannel. So I think maybe those ones would be available too.
Can you do that again? Because Vadim put a poll in front of that. So
it's not that exciting. It just says, I don't even, my hair is in the way anyway.
All right, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, so definitely. Yeah, those are the 3 core SKUs. So yeah, I'm curious what people's favorites are. So I'll wait until that poll has been conducted to kind of find out the results.
Well, Vadim will have fun with it, so just get ready.
Yeah. I'm gonna vote.
Vote yeah. Everyone vote in the poll.
Excellent. So are you guys on to your bottled and bond? I hope so.
Let's do it. We're starting with the Grizzly Beast, right?
Yeah, I would start with the Grizzly Beast. Bottled and bond is a really special designation. It kind of means that you have survived as a distillery because you do have to have had product that's been in barrel for 4 years in order to release one. And 4 years in the craft distilling space is eternity. I mean, turnaround is really tight. I mean, it's hard with whiskey. You have to wait a really long time. Initial capital to build out a distillery, to start up a distillery is, significant. So to make it to a point where you can actually release a bottled and bond is something that really should be celebrated. Absolutely. Bottled and bond, particularly in our case, since we do a blend of purchased and produced whiskeys for the other SKUs, is a really good way to taste the palate of the distillery that's producing it. So my first project when I started at Redwood Empire was to put together these 2 blends along with Jeff Duckhorn, our master distiller. So I couldn't think of a better way to kind of get acquainted with our house flavor profile than to sit down and taste through a couple hundred barrels and then put these blends together. So that was kind of like the first project that I took on when I started with them. And I'm so glad that was the case, because not only did I get to familiarize myself with kind of the inventory that we had on hand, but also it kind of allowed me to be a part of that release, because obviously these were distilled in 2016. But way before I started at Redwood Empire, I was over, I was distilling bourbon or something like that over at Spiritworks, who knows? But so it allowed me to kind of be a part of it as well. And so I'm really thankful and grateful for that. I'm really proud of both of these. I think they are pretty excellent. With less than a year in of distilling whiskey, these are, I think they'd only been distilling 6 months before the first lot that we used in this blend. So I think that it's pretty amazing considering that these are kind of the beginning stages of learning on their still, which is this one behind me, and things like that. And I'm impressed with kind of what we were able to achieve. So without further ado, Grizzly Beast is our, like I said, it is our bourbon. And it has a slightly lower corn content than the Pipe Dream does. So it's like at 69, I think, % corn. And then again, still the secondary grain is rye, but there's certainly more wheat in this than there typically is. There was one lot, there was 4 barrels that were wheated bourbons. And I was like, Jeff, we have to put in all of those barrels. stick every single one of those in there. I want it in there. Let's do it. So we did, and I'm really happy with it. Wheat, any always expresses is kind of like stone fruit on the nose. So like some apricot and some really lovely, even floral components to it that always seem to kind of pop out, even if it's just a small percentage of what you're using in that blend. So yeah, it was really fun putting that Grizzly Beast together. The rocket.
But did you say?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Did you say that some of the barrels were weeded, but does that mean some weren't?
Yes. So
okay.
Not all, well, all of them had wheat in them, but when I say weeded, I mean like weeded bourbon. So that secondary grain was the wheat. So it was like 51% corn, and then the rest of it, not the rest of it, but the majority, 45% of it was wheat. So much, much higher wheat concentration than what our typical mash bill is, which is that kind of like 70-ish range, with the wheat only being like maybe 5%, because the rest of it is rye and malted barley. Yeah. So significantly increased wheat content for sure. This year, we're actually doing a lot with triticale, which is another favorite grain of mine. I love working with triticale because it's similar to the Lost Monarch in that it's like this mind-bending experience. I mean, when I'm distilling triticale, which is a hybrid grain of wheat and rye, and I'm tasting it off the still, or I'm tasting it out of the barrel or whatever, it tastes exactly like wheat distillate and rye distillate. It does not taste like a combination of those two things. It tastes like both of them simultaneously. And it's just like the most bizarre expression. My palate just doesn't know what to do with it. But so we're doing some high triticale bourbons, some high triticale ryes, and those will all eventually be incorporated into these bottled and bonds, since they really don't have a place with those core SKUs. So they're going to be used as part of the blending portfolio for when we do more bottled and bond, for sure. Yeah.
I've never heard of triticale. That's
Thank you, Vadim, because I was just going to ask Lauren to kind of dive down that a little bit, because I'm like, Trita, what? And
Yeah.
My brain feels like that pipe dream.
Explosion. Yeah.
Jim Beam released like an 11-year-old triticale bourbon like 6-7 years ago, right? Was that the first time that someone used it in whiskey?
Dryfly's been doing it for a while. I don't know when the first time they ever released it though was.
I think Dryfly came after. That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Well, Dryfly is like pretty much straight triticale. So they have a much, much higher triticale content. And I've done 100% triticale before, and I really love it. But it's kind of a grain that doesn't get used that often because people think of it as like lower quality. It's kind of like animal feed, essentially, is what it is. It's not really used for.
So is corn.
Yeah, but like corn is like fancy animal feed. Triticale is like you just toss some of that on the ground and people eat it, you know. But it's not really used for much else. It's not really used for bread. It's not really used for any other consumables, really. I have seen some beer that has triticale in it, but that's very rare. Do I see that? And so it really just isn't used that much outside of just like a feed component. So it's really cheap, which I think also maybe turns people off. So just to put it in perspective for you, with the way the world is right now, we're at like 50 cents a pound for corn for us, which is a lot more. And triticale is like 30 cents a pound. So when you're doing, 40,000 pound purchases every month or so, like that adds up. So anyway, but it's an interesting grain to work with. It's much easier to work with processing wise than rye is, but you still get a lot of the similar flavors. So it's really fun to work with there. And as I mentioned, like maybe 100 times already, I love the flavor of wheat. So it kind of gives me that, scratch that itch for me as well. But yeah, so we're going to be replacing this year. We're actually going to be replacing a good amount of the wheat content that we have been using in our mash bills with triticale. for the next maybe 3 or 4 months at least, and then maybe a little bit longer than that. So it'll be fun. It'll be a good one. But yeah, I like Dry Fly's Triticale whiskey. That was one of the first things that inspired me to kind of go down that route. So cheers to them. For sure.
What other grains are you going to introduce me to today?
Well, I've worked a lot with spelt as well, but I don't think that's an introduction. I'm sure most people have heard of spelt. None of these are probably going to get worked into Emerald Giant, but like einkorn, emmer, like all those ancient grains, I did a whole bunch with those. One grain that I've really wanted to do something with, but it's just like prohibitively expensive, is amaranth. Is doing some stuff with amaranth, but yeah, it's hard to get people on board sometimes with things like that. When
just claim that it survived a tornado, you can charge 10 times as much.
Yeah. Exactly.
Earthquake survivor. It's going to be an earthquake survivor. In California, we have earthquakes every single day. So yeah. Earthquake survivor. It was a 3.0, but to New Yorkers, that's a lot.
I feel like I really got to up my accounting game so that I can like spin it to our financial overlords, like our CEO and everybody, about how Triticale, well, not Triticale, but how amaranth might be a good investment moving forward. But it doesn't seem like they're going to get on board with that. But there's some really fun grains being worked with out there. And I'm always a fan, because a distillate is like the truest expression of that raw material. So I love doing distillates of all kinds of stuff. Fruit. I don't know a distiller out there who doesn't love eau de vies for similar reasons. You're just like so fascinated by how it comes across over in the still. But yeah, Triticale is the one I've been pushing hard for us, and I think they're going to get on board with that. Rocket Top. The Rocket Top was not as easy to put together as the Grizzly Beast was. The Rocket Top was definitely a struggle for us, which I think is why I'm the most proud of that one, because it seems to be that people are kind of really enjoying the Rocket Top. I think it's actually won a couple of awards, but I can't say we haven't released those yet. But the Rocket Top has done really, really well for us. But I'll tell you, that one was a lot of work on the blending floor. So both of these bottled in bonds are batches of 24 barrels. The next batch of bottled and bond that we're going to be doing, which we just finished putting the blends together this month, I think last week, those are going to be 54. So we're going to like double the size of what we did this previous batch. So this is the smallest batch probably that we're going to do. But still, we're working with about 100 barrels in order to pull those 24 barrels from. And it was, there were times when I was like, well, let's hope we can get a full 24 in there, like for sure. But I love it. I think the Rocket Top is really, really special. It's really fun. It has a little bit more of kind of that aggressive nature to it than we kind of were going for in the Emerald Giant. But as a result, it has this really lovely estery nose, which is so fun. And for me, a nose is probably the most important thing. Second important thing is texture. And then third important thing is flavor. When I'm drinking, that's kind of how I feel about it. I know not everybody feels that way, but those are kind of my priority list of enjoyment.
I'm really liking the Rocket Top, but to go back for a second, real quick, to the Grizzly Beast, I just gotta say, you said you took the extra year, and I really think you did the right thing. We've done a lot of these, and whenever we do ones that are young distilleries or new distilleries, and we switch from the source stuff to their own stuff, a lot of time there's a little like, okay, all right. Give me another year or two. And a little green, but a little grassy, but maybe. And I got a lot of honey. I didn't get anything too young. So I thought that Grizzly Beast was real good. And the Rocket Top, like, while not obviously cast strength, is giving me a little, I see what you're saying with the aggressiveness. It's giving me a little bit of that, like, not punch you in the face, but a little like, hey, I'm whiskey. Slap you, which I like and go for. So I agree. Both are very good. I've never had either, but just kudos to both of them, because of that Grizzly Beast, you guys are doing good. And that, I think, is a real sign for you guys, because like I said, in these, and I'm not trying to slam anyone, but that's normally the point in the tastings where I go, okay. But I did not do that here. So
I mean, just that you said that proves that this group knows what they're talking about, because, there's always this push like, well, why don't you make 100% in-house your own stuff, or, you know what I mean? Which I get. I used to do that. I totally understand. But just because you do that doesn't always mean it's going to be a better product. You know what I mean? And I think our goal with Redwood Empire is always to make the best products that we can make. And, sometimes that means different things for different people. So,
well, and to your point, also for the price point, I do like supporting, the little guy in the up, but it's very hard to like shell out 70, $80 for like when it's like there's a lot of $40, $50 bottles that I really like. And so for you to have both, and for the bottle to actually be really good, is a big kudos. That's all.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It is a big deal. Like I said, releasing something, not only bottled and bond, but as our first 100% grain to glass product, it's a really big deal for us, right? Because that's kind of proof in the pudding that you know what you're doing. I mean, you can buy good whiskey and you can put it in a bottle and it's good whiskey, but making good whiskey it's a different story for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to echo what Jordan said. With all the bottles I've been through of Lost Monarch, when I was able to get my hands on Rocket Top a few months ago from Mission, I was a little worried. I was like, all right, this is all them.
Yeah.
Let's see what they can pull off. I was frustrated I didn't buy more than one bottle. It's really good. Congratulations.
Thank you. No, I mean, it just makes me realize you guys really understand this industry and like what's going on, because not everybody gets it like that. So thank you. And I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. I mean, like I said, that's always the goal. I think probably every distiller wants people to enjoy what they're making. And it's always nice to hear that people do, for sure. Not that I haven't heard it the other way sometimes, which is fair enough, but it's nice to hear the good things.
I do want to take a second. I've been having so much fun that I totally forgot to ask everyone to join me on camera and pour a glass of something. Hopefully you still have something left. This has been absolutely fantastic. And I'm having a great time. And I think everyone else is too. Thank you, Jordan, for the reminder. He's staying on top of his whiskey and reminding me to take the photo. So Jake, John, Brian, Tracy, Jennifer, you guys want to jump on? Give it another 30 seconds. While we do that, Lauren, what do you think was our favorite of the first poll? There's going to be another poll in a second, but what do you think was the favorite of the first poll?
Lost Monarch.
Okay, I'll reveal the results in a second after we all take a picture. So everyone raise a glass. Say cheers. Thank you, Lauren, so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Got it. Oh, that's a great photo. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to share the results of the first poll. Yeah, you got it. Nail on the head. Lost Monarch. 57% Lost Monarch, 26 for Emerald Giant, and 17 for Pipe Dream.
Yeah. I think it's just so interesting. I really like the Lost Monarch as well. It's just such an intriguing blend of flavors, for sure. But it's interesting. Like I told you guys at the very beginning, the Pipe Dream is like by far our biggest seller, and that just shows you the power of bourbon, and how strong the loyalty and the recognition is for that as an American whiskey, for sure. I love this. Wow, she just put weed in everything. It's true. I do. I definitely try to do that.
Lauren, I would also kind of say to that comment you just made that, the popularity and love that bourbon gets, I would add that there's so many like ryes that people have not really kind of ventured into, because they go to their local grocery store, bottle shop, and they just kind of go to what they know.
Yeah.
It says bourbon on it. But the one thing, and I wish that more people really kind of had these kind of, in-depth explorations into different expressions, because so many people don't, and they can have their kind of horizons broadened, is rye. I was never a big rye fan until this started, and now it's like,
Single malt.
and didn't even spend money on single malt. Now I've dropped some serious coin, and I don't know. This is another rabbit hole of mine, but I really wish that there would be more of these kind of open dialogue conversations about, okay, if you like X, you should really try this because it's really close and it may not be as expensive. Like Redwood Empire, I've been impressed with all of the SKUs, all of them, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to go out and buy some of these.
Yeah, good.
Anyway,
that's what I wanted to hear.
I absolutely agree with David. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like with rye, even if people are willing to try it, I'm not sure that the level, I mean, there are some amazing ryes out there, but there is also some really bad rye out there. And I think with bourbon, you're just safer to get something that's drinkable. I mean, like you say, not to knock anybody, but there's some rough rye in the market right now. And for me, that's what I find intriguing about it. Like, I really enjoy it. Even when I'm drinking distillate that I don't think is good, I find it very interesting because I'm like trying to figure out what went wrong here. But I feel like with rye, also, it's just, again, kind of much more aggressive in how it sits on your palate than bourbon is. So it's a pretty big transition from bourbon to rye. Like, that's another reason why I think that Lost Monarch is a good gateway, is because it kind of shows you the path away from bourbon a little bit. But yeah, speaking of single malt, we do have single malt in barrel, of course, who doesn't? So that is something that's probably going to be happening, if not next year, then the year after, but probably next year. It's on the schedule for next year, but who knows if it'll actually come out. I don't want to make promises that I can't fulfill. But I've been really going wild with our single malt projects because we do all kinds of crazy things. I just finished doing our last order of malt for these coming single malt projects, and I just get like everything, all different types of malt, and we just mishmash it together. Those ones are going to be much more about the blending than anything else, because we've got stuff that's like 50% chocolate malt. I don't know what experience you might have with chocolate malt, but chocolate malt is essentially baking chocolate. It is so bitter. It is so intense. So to have a mash bill that is 50% chocolate malt, I mean, I don't even know, that distillate wouldn't be necessarily pleasant on its own. So you kind of have to blend it out with stuff that have like caramel or crystal or honey or things like that in those malts, like adding sugar to when you're making chocolate cake, right? You add your baking chocolate and then you add sugar in there to kind of balance it out, so that it's not just crazy bitter. So I am very much looking forward to the blending that's coming our way with the single malt for sure.
I will add that the Vadim, can I say brand names that have done chocolate malt? No, okay, I'm not going.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
So Woodford did a chocolate malt, I think, expression, and I got a bottle of it, and I was just horribly disappointed. So if you're excited about doing something with that, I would be really interested to see what happens, and I hope that you and Vadim can put together another kind of virtual tasting where we can try some of those new expressions.
Definitely.
Laura, if you need a willing group of volunteers to serve as your dedicated, focus group,
yeah,
I think with enough arm twisting, I may be willing to help you put together a group.
Excellent.
Run some like wild stuff by us. We're always happy to. I really want to try this tricolate. What is
cast
it?
strength. Cast strength.
Tritolate.
Yeah, of course. Cast strength.
That guy.
Yeah, I was gonna add too. Like, I mean, usually when you see chocolate malt, it might be like 2% or 5%. Like, I mean, very, very small. So you said 50% and my jaw dropped. I was like, are you kidding? Oh my gosh.
It's like in the bourbon world with like bloody butcher corn. It's, I've seen a couple where they'd use 100% bloody butcher corn. And it's like getting hit in the face with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, exactly. And so the 50%, to be fair, the 50% chocolate malt happened before I got there, and I would never have chosen to make that ever. But I will say that's why I'm really excited to use it as a blender, because I think if you do it right, and you have like I said, that inventory of barrels to support it, you can come up with something pretty cool and interesting. I agree. For me, anything over 2% of chocolate malt, like if you're just doing it straight from a barrel, you're getting into some dangerous area. I mean, I've had 100% chocolate malt distillate before, and wow, it's just a wow for me. And I didn't make it. It wasn't at any of the distilleries I've ever worked at, but I tasted it, and the distiller was very excited about it. And I was just like, no, I don't think so. I'm sorry, I gotta disagree with you there. But again, you're just proving the point that you're a good focus group, because you understand that much chocolate malt is something that you have to really be paying attention to and take into consideration when putting together that kind of final blend. Absolutely, for sure.
But it could be a good experiment because you have the pure product on the side where you know exactly what that flavor is. It's not 2% of something else. You know exactly what that tastes like. So when you're blending it in, I'm going to put a little bit of sugar on it. We did a brand a while back where they had released some really fantastic expressions that were like meant to taste like a cocktail. And it wasn't flavored. It was, they would like age it in a barrel of like from bitters and a barrel from this and a barrel from that, and then combine barrels. And they said that they did equal amount of barrels of each individual ingredient. And so they ended up with like 98% of the bitters barrels still left over because they only put like drops of it in.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible to make a good spirit with 100% chocolate malt. I'm just saying, kudos to you if you can do it.
What's kind of like whiskey? Give it more time or blend it with something else.
Yeah. I mean, what time and money fix everything, right? So it's just like you can fix anything with time and money. That's very true. But people who can do that well, I'm always impressed. It's kind of like lavender and gin for me. People who can put lavender in their gin recipes and make it work and not have it like taste soapy or completely overpower everything else, I'm always just like in awe of, because I've never been able to do that. So I'm just like, no, lavender, no.
I had two things. One with rye. My own personal theory is that rye, I think, still suffers from what hurt the whiskey industry decades ago, where it still thought of as like your grandpa's drink. And I think it still has that, which hurts it. But second, you haven't mentioned it, but I'm just going to assume that very closely after you started, you have made either 100% or near 100% weeded whiskey. And so I'm wondering, like, when is that coming out, and when can we like sample cast strength weeded whiskey, because you like weed and I bet it's really good, and where's that?
At Spirit Works. They're not gonna let me make a weeded. They're not gonna let me make 100% wheat whiskey at this company, I would say. But there are some.
Who do we write to like?
Where's the petition for wheat whiskey?
Exactly. Like let her make it. Like
let her make it. I mean, I will try. I will definitely try for sure. The problem is that with wheat whiskey, we can't use it in any of the core SKUs, right? We'd have to create a whole new label for it, a whole new SKU for wheat whiskey, because we couldn't put it into the bourbon. We couldn't put it into the rye. We could put it into the Lost Monarch. But that's, I honestly, that's probably the reason. I mean, we could do a bottled and bond wheat whiskey. So it kind of depends on, I guess, how well the bottled and bond goes, guys. So keep buying bottles of that. And then if we can prove the fact that there's people out there who are interested in that kind of thing, then for sure. But yeah, I do love wheated whiskey. I've also had some wheat whiskey that's not good. So I can't say that I love all wheat whiskey, but for the most part, I do really, really love it. Just tastes like the most delicious, like nectarines and apricots, and then a lot of like apple blossoms and honeysuckle. And who doesn't love all four of those things? I mean, it's delicious. It's not necessarily as dark or as deep or as rich or as complex as a lot of bourbons and ryes tend to be, but it's just like so beautiful and delicate and pretty. And I like those things too. For sure. So you did the poll for all of the SKUs? Is that what that poll was for?
I did, yeah. Favorite of the night overall. And we have a result. Do you want to guess what the favorite was of the night?
No. I want to keep my 100% accuracy on
I
guessing.
like that. Okay. All right. Then I'll share the results. The winner of the night was Rocket Top by a landslide. 50% voted Rocket Top, 25% voted for Grizzly Beast, 15 for Lost Monarch, and 10 for Pipe Dream. So Pipe Dream's still holding its own, but
Grizzly Beast.
It's good on the two bottled and bonds. You guys are clearly doing a good job.
Thank you. Yeah, it means a lot. And like I said, I'm also very proud of that Rocket Top, even though it took some time to put that together. I'm glad that care that we put into that bottle is being enjoyed by you guys, because it was a battle. It was a struggle to get it. But like I said, I think we're just so pleased with how both of those turned out. So yeah, next batch, they are going to be doing batch to batch. So they're not going to be the same at all in terms of mash bill percentages or grain percentages in them. So this next rye, the next Rocket Top that we're releasing, it's going to have some corn in it. Which is like a what? But we had another small batch of just kind of rye whiskey that had like a 5% corn addition in it. And so we're going to use all of those barrels in this next batch of Rocket Top. So it's going to be pretty different than this Rocket Top, for sure.
Are you numbering your batches?
Yes, I think so. Yes. I think I'm trying to think about where it's numbered. I think it's the U stamp, the one that goes over the top. I think that one says 001 on it. If it doesn't say 001 on it, then this next batch definitely says 002 on it. I just did the approval, like the final check off on the label, so I have seen that. For sure. But yeah, so that one's gonna have some corn in it, and then the bourbon is gonna have a little bit more rye in it, I think, this time than we did previously. So,
Lauren, are you in the big chain stores in Southern California?
The biggest chain store that I know of that we're in, and we're in Bevmo for sure, and I know that we're in some Costco's as well. But I don't know of any of the other big chain stores.
I think I've seen you guys in like.
Oh, we are in Total Wine. Yes, thank you, Total Wine. Yes.
Okay.
But like supermarkets, I think I've seen you guys in Rouse and Albertsons, right, Shane?
Perfect.
Yep, that's correct.
Definitely in Rouse. Yeah.
Pavilions.
Pavilions has them. There you go.
Bonds in my area.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But the bottled and bond, those are limited release. So usually those are like specialty shops.
Yeah.
David, are you looking at Craig's screen?
I would say, actually, this is a good group to announce it to. Oh, very nice. Yes.
Wow. What the hell just happened? How did you? Jeez. Wait, did you have a hookup from a DM?
Every once in a while, it pays to be a big guy.
They sent me 2 XXX shirts, so the 2 XXX guys got them.
You just manifested that shirt. Yeah.
Wow.
Wait, is that a collared shirt you got? Thanks, Vadim.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Hey, take a good
Hey,
look
I
at
wear
that, Dave.
triple X.
Oh, I see the T-shirt. There you go. Yes, again, thanks, Vadim.
You're welcome.
David, make sure you get a good look at that. That's what's going on your back, right?
Yeah, well, put it on a sweatshirt, something like that. I love it. Or for my brother-in-law, put it on a small.
Big Grizzly.
Who the hell's a small these days?
My 3-year-old. But so I have a question. So I know with COVID, I can't remember. It could have been a year ago, could have been 6 years ago. Who knows now? But you did I think a pick with an Orange County store that was, I thought, port finished, high proof, that was supposedly spectacular, but I found out about it too late.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but any
I
chance
do.
are you going to do more of those? Are they out there now? Where can we find them? How can Vadim get us bottles? How does that work?
It's Haystack Needle is the name of that release. Haystack Needle. It is this is going to be our last year releasing the same type of product that we have released in the past. So this year it's going to be 15 year. Last year it was 14, and then 2 years, a year before that or whatever, I think it was 12 years. So yeah, 12, 14, and then this is going to be our 15 year, and it's our last release of the liquid that we have. And we're going to do port finish, cab finish, and we're going to do some brandy finish. So in-house brandy, we actually make a significant amount of brandy that we haven't done anything with, that we haven't made anything, we haven't bottled it or done anything with, because we're in the middle of wine country. So we have a whole bunch of access to grapes.
Are you
And
doing grape brandy or fruit brandy?
What was that?
Grape or fruit?
So both. We've done mostly grape brandy, not a surprise, but we have some like out of this world Asian pear brandy that is like so good. And then we also have a lot of apple brandy. The area that we're in is known for Gravenstein apples, which is one of the only cider apples that was over here. So it's really good for fermenting. And so we have Gravenstein apple brandy as well. And so we did a brandy consolidation project earlier this year. So we have a couple of free brandy barrels. So I think we're going to finish some of that in our brandy barrels for sure.
And will you be offering that anywhere local in Los Angeles instead of just like Orange County or up near you?
So that's the thing, is we only have 10 barrels. So it's across country. So it's highly allocated.
But you're in California, and so are we. So don't we get preferential treatment?
I think California gets like 5 barrels, to be honest. So I mean, it definitely gets the majority of what we make for sure. But I don't know. That's the thing, is like I haven't really had a chance to immerse myself into our sales team very much. I'm doing my first in-market visit. I mean, like, I guess trip. Next month, I'm going to Florida. So I feel like I'll be able to make some deep connections there with our sales team, hopefully. But I really haven't had much time to integrate with them, since it's been, a year of kind of acclimating to the distillery and the team and overall distillery operations. But I'm definitely one of those people who likes to not stick my nose into everything, but like definitely get in there and figure it out. So hopefully I'll know more about where we're actually going to have those available. But as of right now, I'm not even sure who they're allocated to. That's another thing that's going to be released at the end of the year, this year, for sure. That's kind of our release time, is we do a fourth quarter release for Haystack Needle. And that's what that, K&L did have it.
I got mine at Bevmo in NorCal. So
yeah, there's a Chardonnay finish. Everyone was like, oh, we don't want the Chardonnay finish, but the blind tasting of the several different offerings, we had a Zin finish, cab finish, Chardonnay finish, and port finish. Chardonnay finish won every single time on a blind tasting.
The problem with white is it can be sour sometimes. So
I mean, that's the problem with wine all the time. For me, I mean, to be honest, wine finishes are not my favorite. Like I think you have to be really good at barrel treatments in order to do wine finishes well. I'm much more of like a cognac brandy type finish. I like port too, I guess.
Yeah, port is different. I think you're right. Like the dry wines,
yeah,
it's so hit and miss, and for me, it's usually miss. But
yeah,
port is usually pretty good. Sherry, obviously, yeah.
I think a lot of times, especially with smaller distilleries, they're just bringing barrels in and they don't know much about barrel treatment. So the barrels have been sulfured, or they have been sitting too long without stuff inside of them. So they have kind of like a musty quality to them. So for me, wine finishes can be tricky. The good news for us is that our winery is in the same space as the distillery. So it like literally gets emptied out and then we stick the whiskey in it. So it's just so much cleaner, I think, that transition than it tends to be for some other expressions of that. But
do you get your wine barrels from one specific place or from just a mix of different?
From our brands. So I think I mentioned, yeah, at the beginning, I mean, the majority of our company is wine.
Oh, okay, right.
So we have like a couple of big brands, but our biggest brand is Rayburn Chardonnay, and so there's that. But we also make all kinds of stuff. I mean, we make rosé, cab, zin, everything. It all gets made. So we have access to some, quite a wide range of barrels. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, when you start planning your LA visit, please let us know. We'd love to meet up with you and have a few drinks and chat.
We're even better looking in person.
Fair enough.
Speak for yourself, sir.
Especially Vadim. He's 6'5".
Craig's over there dying. Look, they call me tall, dark, and handsome. When it gets dark, I get handsome. And I'm really not that tall. But look, this has been absolutely fantastic. This has been a blast. Thank you so much. I'm not telling anyone to leave and I'm not kicking anyone out, but I am going to finish the recording so we can just hang out and have a few drams. And if people do need to quietly take their leave, they can. But thank you so much, Lauren. This has been an absolute blast, and we look forward to having you back with more expressions, more R&D, and having another chat with you down the line. Hopefully we can make this a series. We look forward to seeing what else you have coming out.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lauren. Really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Cheers.